"This is your new home," said her son. But they didn't imagine she was vengeful. The car drove away slowly, not in a hurry, not with regret. It faded into the dust of the dirt road as if that were the most natural thing in the world, and she stayed there, sitting on the shoulder of the road with her suitcase at her side and her heart broken in two. Her son had looked away the moment he set her suitcase on the ground. He didn't look back even once. Mrs. Martha stood there, watching that grey car disappear into the dry brush on both sides of the road. There was a makeshift shelter of branches and an old tarp nearby, the kind road workers leave behind when they finish a job. She picked up her suitcase and went over there. She crouched carefully because her knees weren't what they used to be and sat on the hard grass. And then her hand went up to her face, and the tears came. But as she cried, her other hand went to the pocket of her beige cardigan and touched her cell phone. It was still there. She had two numbers in her head, Dorothy's and Caroline's, and one thing Justin didn't know. 15 days earlier, everything still seemed different. Justin had arrived at his mother's house on a Wednesday afternoon with a composed look on his face, the look of someone carrying something on his mind. Martha knew that face. She'd known it since her son was 8 years old and tried to convince her to let him skip school. It was his negotiating face. She was in the kitchen, peeling potatoes. She didn't stop what she was doing. "Talk, Justin." "Mom, I came to talk about something important. Courtney and I talked a lot. We want you to come live with us. It's not right for you to stay here alone in this house anymore." The house wasn't big. 3 bedrooms, a kitchen, a backyard where she'd grown herbs since she married Arthur. But it was hers and Arthur's, who had passed away 3 years earlier from a silent heart attack while sleeping. Martha had found him in the morning, his face still serene as if he'd had a good dream. She'd never been able to describe it better than that. She didn't answer right away. She put another potato in the bowl and said, "I'll think about it." Justin spent another hour trying to convince her. He brought up arguments she knew by heart, her age, her high blood pressure, the neighbor down the street who had fallen in the bathroom and lay on the floor for a while before someone found him. They were arguments that hurt because they had a sliver of truth, and he knew how to use that. What Martha didn't tell her son that day was that she'd already been thinking about it for some time. Not about going to live with him, not exactly, but about rethinking how she was living her life. She felt the house was too much for just one person. She felt Arthur's absence in every room, especially at night. So she started giving in, little by little, without quite realizing how it was happening. In the weeks that followed, Justin and Courtney kept showing up with proposals. The first was simple: sell the house, use the money to renovate the guest room, and the rest would go toward her comfort. The second came along with it. The commercial unit she rented to a couple of bakers could also be sold because maintaining property was a lot of work, and she was at an age where she deserved to rest. Martha had 2 assets, the house she lived in and that commercial unit. The baker's rent paid her bills with plenty to spare. It was what had kept her independent since Arthur had passed. There was something about this whole thing that didn't quite add up. It was a feeling, like when you smell food, and you're not sure if it's good or not, but you're already wary. It was Mrs. Dorothy who said what she didn't want to hear. Dorothy had been Martha's neighbor for 42 years. They had raised their children together, had cried together when their husbands began to grow old, had had coffee together on countless mornings, always at the same green laminate table in Martha's kitchen. "Martha, are you selling everything you have to go live in your son's house? He says it's better this way. And what do you think?" Silence. "Dorothy, I'm tired of being alone. Being alone is different from having nothing. If you go to his house without the commercial unit, without the house, without your own income, if it goes wrong, what do you have?" Martha stared at her coffee. She didn't answer. The pressure from Justin was stronger than Dorothy's voice. Courtney called every day, talked about the plans they'd made for her room, about the renovations that had already started, about how happy they were going to be together. And Justin showed up in person every week, with that concerned son demeanor that squeezed her heart. There are things we want to believe so badly that we sweep the doubt under the rug. Martha wanted to believe her son loved her enough for this. She wanted to believe she'd have family around her again. So she signed. The house was sold within a month. The commercial unit, the following one. The money from both sales was deposited into her account, and Justin was very attentive through that whole phase, always nearby, always careful, always with a kind word. On moving day, Martha carefully wrapped up Arthur's photos, tucked his favorite mug inside her coat so it wouldn't break in the box, and left the house where she'd spent 43 years of her life with teary eyes, but her head held high. She shouldn't have been so proud. She should have looked more carefully at what she was leaving behind. In the first few days at Justin's house, everything seemed reasonable. The room was small but tidy. Courtney had left flowers on the windowsill. Meals were on time. Martha stayed in her room when she felt the couple wanted privacy, helped in the kitchen when they let her. But the shift happened slowly. First, it was the TV schedule. Martha had a habit of watching the news early in the morning. Courtney said the noise woke up the couple's little daughter. Okay, Martha turned the volume down. Then came the breakfast issue. Courtney cooked at a specific time and didn't like having the kitchen messed with outside of that. Martha started waiting. Then came the subtle comments about space, about how hard it was to have another person in the routine, about how the bills had gone up. Martha kept shrinking. She stayed in her room more and more, went out less and less, talked less and less. What hurt the most wasn't her daughter-in-law's silence, it was her son's silence. Justin left early in the morning and came back at night. When he was home, he was tired or glued to his phone screen. When Martha tried to talk, he listened with half his attention. The other half was always somewhere else. Something was going on, she could feel it. The confirmation came on a night she shouldn't have heard anything. It was almost 11. Martha had woken up thirsty and gone to the kitchen in the dark so as not to bother anyone. The hallway passed near the couple's bedroom, and the door was slightly ajar. She didn't want to listen, but the voices were clear. Justin, this can't keep going like this. I know, Court. She's been here for a month and a half and it's already too much. This isn't what I imagined. I know. And the money? Did you transfer everything? A long pause. Only what we agreed on. I need you to resolve this soon. I can't live like this, with her inside the house staring at me every day. Martha stood still in the hallway. She didn't breathe. She didn't move. She heard more than she wanted to hear. When she went back to her room, she lay down on the bed with Arthur's mug pressed against her chest and stayed in the dark, thinking. She didn't cry that night. She was calculating. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The next day, Justin woke up early and asked to talk. He said they'd thought about it a lot and that the house situation wasn't working out. He said she needed a more suitable place. He said he talked to a man from a farm a few miles away who needed someone to help with the chickens in exchange for housing. Martha heard everything without blinking. And the money from my sales. Mom, the renovation cost more than we expected, and the debts I had. What debts? Justin's face closed up. This isn't the time to discuss that. What matters is that you'll have a place. She went. Because she had nowhere else to go at that moment. Because Courtney had packed her suitcase while she was sleeping. Because her son opened the car door with an expression she had never seen on him before. An expression that said he had already made the decision and didn't want her getting in the way. They drove for almost an hour. He grew quieter as the road grew emptier. When he stopped the car, it was at a bend in a dirt road, with dry brush on both sides and no house in sight. Stay here. Someone will come by soon and pick you up. Justin. Mom, don't complicate things. Justin, look at me. He looked. For a second, she thought she'd see the 8-year-old boy. But she didn't. She saw a man ashamed of himself who would rather not have that shame than fix what he had done. He went back to the car. He grabbed the suitcase and set it on the shoulder of the road and drove away. I needed to stop here for a moment, because there's a type of betrayal that is different from all others. It's the one that comes from the person you bet on the most, and it doesn't hurt all at once. It opens slowly, like a crack you never saw growing. Martha stood watching the car disappear around the bend. Long white hair that she never cut because Arthur liked it that way. The same beige cardigan as always, and a mind that, despite everything, had never stopped working. She walked to the shelter made of branches and tarp, sat down, and only then cried. But as she cried, her hand touched her cell phone in her pocket. Caroline was the youngest daughter. She lived in a town a few hours away, had 2 teenage kids, and a job that consumed much of her time. They talked every week, but rarely saw each other. Martha had never liked complaining to Caroline because she didn't want to be the burden her daughter carried from afar. But now she dialed. Caroline answered on the second ring. "Mum, what happened? Are you okay?" "No, my dear, I'm not okay." And she told her everything. The sale of the house, the commercial unit, the small room, the voices in the hallway, the suitcase packed at dawn, the road. On the other end, Caroline stayed silent for a time that seemed too long. Then, "Mum, where exactly are you?" "On a road. I don't know the name." "Look around. Is there a sign? Any landmark?" Martha stood up slowly, her bones protesting from the cold ground, and went to the edge of the road. She saw a crooked wooden sign pointing to a rural property. "There's a sign here that says Willow Creek Farm. Stay there, don't move, I'll find you." While waiting, Martha called Dorothy. The neighbor answered before the first ring finished. "Martha, you disappeared, I was worried." "Dorothy, do you remember that envelope I left with you before I moved?" Pause. "I remember. Don't open it yet, but keep it very safe." "Martha, what happened?" "I'll tell you everything later. For now, keep the envelope safe." The envelope. That's what Justin and Courtney didn't know. Here I need to go back a bit so you can understand, because Martha wasn't a fool. She never was. She had been a school teacher for 22 years, had raised her children with Arthur, using every penny the right way, had managed her own life with her own resources since she was very young. Old age hadn't taken her intelligence. It had only changed the speed at which things came to her. The week before signing the papers for the sale of the commercial unit, she had asked for a day alone, saying she needed to review the accounts. Justin agreed without questioning. That day, Martha went to the notary public office, accompanied by her trusted lawyer, a white-haired gentleman who had taken care of the family's paperwork for many years. And she had done something very simple. The commercial unit had been sold, yes. But there was a clause in an old contract, predating Justin and Martha's marriage, that protected a savings account Martha had kept separate all those years. An account opened with Arthur decades before, in her name and no one else's. The balance had grown slowly, month by month, without her ever touching it. Justin didn't know that account existed. Arthur and she had kept it for a real emergency. The balance wasn't a fortune, but it was enough for her to get back on her feet. In the envelope she had left with Dorothy, there was a copy of that contract, the details of that account, and a handwritten letter explaining everything. But there was one more thing inside that envelope, a second letter addressed to Justin. It wasn't an angry letter. It was a letter of documentation. Martha had an old cell phone with an audio recorder that Arthur had gotten as a freebie at a drugstore years before, and that had been forgotten in a drawer. In the last few weeks she spent in her son's house, she had carried that cell phone in her cardigan pocket and turned on the recorder at specific moments. There was Courtney's voice saying she couldn't live with her in the house. There was Justin's voice confirming transfers. There was a whole conversation about how they were going to use the money from the sales to pay off debts from a bad investment. The letter to Justin described those recordings. It didn't threaten anything, it just made clear that she knew. I still think about it to this day. How many people in the same situation would have seen it in time? How many would have acted while there was still a chance? Martha did all of it quietly, without alarm, without confiding in anyone. She prepared without being sure she'd need to, and that's what made the difference. Caroline arrived 3 hours later. She came down the dirt road with the car kicking up dust, parked next to her mother, and ran out before even turning off the engine. She hugged her for a long time without saying anything. Then she put the suitcase in the back seat and said, "Come home with us, Mom." "And your space?" "Mom, stop it." Martha went. At Caroline's house that same day, the two of them sat at the kitchen table, and the mother told her everything she had kept inside. Caroline listened with her hands clasped on the table, just like her father, and when her mother finished, she stayed quiet for what felt like a heavy stretch. "You did all of this alone? The envelope? The recordings?" "I did." "When did you start?" "I did it as I started to realize. At first I still hoped it was all in my head, but then the pieces started falling into place." Caroline kept looking at her, with an expression Martha couldn't quite decipher. It was admiration and pain at the same time. "What do you want to do with all of this?" It was the right question, and Martha already had the answer. "I want to talk to Justin, not to fight, so he can look me in the eye and explain how he got to this point. I need to understand. And if he doesn't want to talk? Then he'll know the envelope exists." Caroline set the meeting for the following Sunday. She called her brother and simply said their mother was with her and they needed to talk. Justin hesitated, said he was busy, that it could wait until the next week. Caroline said it wasn't a question. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like, and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. On Sunday, Justin arrived without Courtney. He walked into Caroline's living room with that guarded demeanor of someone bracing for an argument. But when he saw his mother sitting on the couch, her white hair pinned back and her eyes fixed on him, he lost a bit of his composure. "Mom." "Sit down, Justin." He sat. Caroline stood by the window, arms crossed, saying nothing. The silence stretched so long he had to break it. "Mom, I know what happened was wrong." "Wrong." Martha repeated the word slowly. "You put me on a dirt road with no money, not knowing where I was at 70 years old. I thought someone would come by soon." "Justin." Her voice wasn't loud. It was quiet in a way that cut deeper than a scream. "Don't give me justifications, give me the truth." And the truth came out. With difficulty, with hesitation, but it came out. The debts were real. Justin had invested in a partnership with an acquaintance who had gone bankrupt, and the debt had ended up in his name. He'd spent months without telling Courtney, who found out and was furious. When Courtney suggested using his mother's assets as a way out, he resisted at first, not for long. "I said you were going to be fine, that I was going to take care of things." "Did you say that, or did you want to believe it to make yourself feel better?" Justin didn't answer. "I'm 70 years old, Justin. I worked my entire life. Your father and I built everything from scratch with our own hands. And you took me out of my home. You took me out of the commercial unit. You took away my independence. And you left me on a dirt road like I was a piece of furniture that no longer served any purpose." His eyes were glistening, but Martha didn't feel sorry for him, not yet. "I have recordings of your conversations with Courtney. I have the contract that protects my savings. I have a lawyer that Caroline recommended to me, and she's already read everything." Justin went pale. "But that's not what I want." A pause. "What do you want, Mom?" "I want you to look me in the eyes and acknowledge what you did. I want the money from the commercial unit back, whatever you can manage in installments if necessary. And I want you to understand that what you did wasn't a mistake in judgment. It was a choice. You chose the debts and Courtney's pressure over your own mother, and I need you to know that I know that. That I've always known." The room fell silent. Justin put his hand over his face. When he lowered it, his eyes were wet. "I have no excuse, Mom." "No, you don't." I was weak. I panicked about the debt and Courtney pressuring me, and I didn't think about you the way I should have." "No, you didn't. I'm so sorry." Martha looked at her son for what seemed like a long time. She searched his face for the boy she had raised, and she found him, underneath it all, hidden, but still there. "I don't know if I forgive you today. I don't know if I can yet. But I'm not going to destroy you either, because destroying you would be destroying myself, and I'm past the age of spending what I have left on that." Caroline let out the breath she'd been holding. What came after took months. It wasn't easy. Justin got in touch with a family mediator that Caroline recommended and started paying back what he could in installments. Courtney, when she found out about the recordings, found herself in a difficult position. She didn't try to fight. She stayed quiet. Martha used the savings she had set aside to rent a small apartment near Caroline's house. 2 bedrooms, a balcony with afternoon sun, a kitchen where she could make her coffee whenever she wanted. Dorothy went to visit her on the second weekend and stayed for 2 hours drinking coffee on the new balcony, the sun hitting the old cups that Martha had managed to rescue from the moving boxes. "I knew you had some kind of plan. I didn't really know. I was preparing just in case. And if you hadn't needed it?" Martha smiled. It was a tired smile, but a whole one. "Then I would have kept the envelope and never said a word. But when Courtney packed my suitcase in the middle of the night, I knew." Dorothy shook her head slowly. 70 years old, and still smarter than the two of them combined. Martha didn't answer. She watched the sun going down behind the houses. There was a thought that kept coming back to her in the following days. It wasn't anger, it wasn't sadness. It was more like clarity, like when you wipe a foggy window and see what was always on the other side. She had sold the house where she'd spent 43 years because she wanted to believe that her son truly loved her. And the son had taken advantage of that love in a way she was still trying to understand. But through all of that, she had learned something about herself, that even feeling nostalgic, even wanting family, even at 70 years old with tired knees and Arthur's absence felt in every corner, she hadn't given up what was truly hers. The house had been sold, but her mind, no. At Christmas that year, Caroline gathered the family. Justin showed up with Courtney and their little girl. It was uncomfortable, it was tense, but it happened. And Martha kept watching her 2-year-old granddaughter running through the living room and thought that some things were bigger than the hurt. She hadn't forgotten. She wasn't going to forget. But she had decided to carry it in a way that wouldn't bend her. End of story. This story stays on my mind for a very simple reason. Martha didn't scream, didn't run, didn't act on impulse. She waited. She kept gathering what she could gather while there was still time, and when the moment came, she knew exactly what she had in her hands. Tell us in the comments what you thought, where you're watching from, and whether you think she went far enough with Justin, or if she was too generous. We'd love to read your opinion. Thank you so much for joining us today. Leave a like to help the channel grow and subscribe so you don't miss the next stories.